Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
I hope you can hear me. Sorry I can't be there in person. I had some family business out of state. But if we can get started, that would be great. I'm going to start with a roll call just to make sure we know who's here. This is the June 10th first meeting of the MCI Concord Advisory Board. And when I call your name, if you just say here, if you're online, that would be helpful to unmute and let me know. Linda Miller.
Here.
Patrick McCurdy.
He's being sworn in. Here he is.
Right.
Say here. Here.
There you go.
Yeah, Peter Lowett. I know Peter had said that he.
Going to be joining for just a little while.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Glad to know you're with us. Scott Bates,
Here.
Lee Smith,
Here.
John Boynton,
Here.
Aaron Kushner,
Here.
Emily Rush,
Here.
Elizabeth Akers Moore,
Here.
and Dan Gainsborough.
Here.
Also, I know it may be a little difficult to see, but we have Kyle Stapleton joining us from Rep. Cataldo's office, as well as Marcus Thornton, and Paul Littlehagen from DCAM is also online. I'm not sure how easily you can see the screens. And Mary Hardman, I notice, is here to assist. So as you already know, the Lori Austin from the town clerk's office is available. I'm going to assume that everyone's had an opportunity to get sworn in, but if they haven't, you can just step out and have her swear you in. If you haven't had a chance to make it to town hall, it would be appreciated if you would take care of that pretty soon. Since I'm not present in the room and it's a little hard to see, I'm going to be asking for us to elect a chair pro tem to facilitate this meeting, and my suggestion is that we nominate Dan Gainsborough to do that for us today. Do I hear a motion?
No.
And a second? Thank you. And I guess we need, because we're hybrid, we need to take a roll. So I'm going to do that in the same order that I called attendance. Linda Miller,
Yes.
Patrick McCurdy,
Yes.
Peter Lowett,
Yes.
Scott Bates,
Yes.
Lee Smith,
Yes.
John Boynton,
Yes.
Aaron Kushner,
Yes.
Emily Rush,
Yes.
Elizabeth Aker Moore,
Yes.
and Dan.
Yes.
Thank you. Also, can we have a volunteer to clerk this meeting? The meeting notes will be taken by Shannon as our staff support, but the clerk would be responsible for reviewing the minutes of this meeting and presenting them to the town clerk when they've been approved at our next meeting, hopefully.
Was
that a first volunteer?
Yeah, I was asking about.
Oh.
We all,
Oh.
he is fine.
Okay, did we get a volunteer?
I'm sorry, what was it? I was trying to plug my computer. What was it?
He volunteered, I think.
Yeah.
Just to be clerk of the meeting, which means that your name will appear on the minutes as the clerk, but as I mentioned, Shannon is actually taking notes, so you'll get a draft.
Yeah. Okay, in the absence of others stepping up, I will.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, John. Yeah, just wanted to do the housekeeping. Okay, the main purpose of today's meeting is to begin to kick off our work as an advisory board. The agenda calls for staff updates, which will bring us up to date on activities that have been taking place within the town staff, as well as some information that we've been able to get with the information sharing that's going on with DCAM. And then really it's up to the board to hold a discussion around organization and approach. we have some ideas there, but we're gonna ask Megan Zamudo to go ahead and bring us up to date on the staff work. And I'm going to let Dan facilitate the comments because while I can see you all, I can't see you well enough to know who might be leaning forward and getting ready to say something. So I'm going to turn it over to Dan from here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Megan?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Zamudo. I'm the deputy town manager. I'm happy to see you all here today. I have a brief update that was outlined in the agenda. So the first item was our kind of ongoing relationship and meetings with the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance. Town staff, myself, and some members of the select board, Mary Hartman and Mark Howell. And we have Kyle Stapleton have been meeting with the DCAM team on a regular basis. We've been meeting just about every other Friday for the past 6 weeks or so. We have Paul Lillenhagen, who's the project manager, and he is listening in, oh, yes, hi, Paul. He's here on the call today, which is great. He is the project manager of the DCAM, of the MCI Concord project. And then also Abby Vladbeck is the director of public and private development, and she's been on our regular calls as well. And so Paul's here, and I was planning to communicate, and he can do it himself if he'd like, that they're eager to come to an early meeting of this advisory board to give a presentation about the work that they've been doing, so you can hear it straight from them. And so I think that when you're talking about next steps and agenda planning, they'd be interested in coming sooner rather than later to meet with you all. At our last meeting this past Friday, we learned that they're getting ready for a survey of the site. They're working to prepare for a phase 1 environmental site assessment. They're working on scopes for an analysis of the engineering components on the site. And so they've been busy kind of preparing for this next phase and learning more about the site. The Department of Corrections is still operating the facility as a prison, and that will continue until June 30th. And so right now, inmates are moving out, employees are moving out, and their plan is for July 1 to continue a Department of Correction presence as they finalize their turn down process. And so we don't know exactly the time frame for that process and the details of what it will entail. But as soon as we have more information about that and its eventual transition to DCAM, we'll pass it along. A couple other updates here were regarding the wastewater facility status, and we're lucky to have Concord Public Works Director Alan Cathcart here. Alan, do you want to say a few words about where we are with our contract and kind of assessment of the facility?
Sure, yeah, very quickly. So just to be clear, there is a wastewater facility there that has a NIPD's permit for 300,000 gallons per day. It will continue to be used for the farm across the rotary, so we'll be active. However, it's been sort of already starting to scale down as far as the operation as they move inmates and staff out of the MCI. We've had a visit or tour of that facility a couple months ago, just to put some eyes immediately on it. We work with Woodard and Curran as our contract operations of our existing municipal facility. We brought them along, and we also brought a consultant, Weston and Sampson, who is engaged to do wastewater planning, for the town. So we've entered into a new contract with Weston and Sampson. They are going to take a lead on another tour tomorrow. Now that things are starting to, ramp up as far as any potential, I don't want to say transition, but right now we're engaged with what's the existing facility look like. We know there's significant needs. And just try and work with a DOC on ongoing, operations. So there'll be, that's where we're at as far as just sort of exploratory fact finding right now on existing conditions, and then we'll report back, when we have more information.
Do you know what the daily usage for the farm side is going to be?
I think it's somewhere around 800,000 gallons, 80,000 gallons a day. But, and I have heard that they don't anticipate any significant change in that operation. So but we'll be vetting that out as we go forward.
Great, thank you. A couple other updates, and I may turn to Kyle in a second, if that's okay, but for the legislative side of things, there's a amendment to the budget that was proposed by Representative Cataldo, which included both funding ask for $250,000 for planning, and also laid out an 18-month planning process from when the budget is adopted to work with stakeholders, local and state stakeholders, to talk through and decide on the future use of MCI Concord. That's gone to the Senate, and the funding was amended, and now it's looking at $475,000 for planning. And that was adopted by the Senate, it's my understanding, and then the conference committee will work out the differences between the House and Senate versions. And so Kyle, do you have other things to add there? Can I turn it over to you for the latest?
No, I think you covered it. As you said, the Senate adopted it for 475,000, the House was 250. So we think the floor is at least the 250,000, and we'll see what comes out of conference, but we'd expect that to be the minimum. Also, I just want to add that Rep. Cataldo is in another meeting right now. He hopes to join a little bit later. But if he is able, he'd love to get on a future agenda with this advisory board, and would like to attend one of your meetings or several of your meetings. And I'll always be here as well, just to keep an eye on everything.
Great, thank you. And Keith, did you have something you wanted to add to this piece?
Yeah, thanks very much. Keith Bergman, Chair of the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust, and just to put on our collective radar screens, there's another bill that's making its way through the legislature, which the housing advocates anyway that it views as related. It's the Affordable Homes Act, also known as the Housing Bond Bill. It's a 5-year bond bill. The House version includes $6 billion for which is $2 billion more than the governor proposed. It did not. The House did not include a real estate transfer fee, which Concord has long advocated since 2019. The concern of the housing groups is that that real estate transfer fee, which may or may not end up being in the Senate's version of the Affordable Homes Act. We'll find that out soon, probably within the next week. That the real estate transfer fee would basically been how the town of Concord could pay for whatever its share of any, if there's affordable housing as one of the components, say for MCI Concord. It certainly would be for the adjacent property that the CHDC owns, the 12 acres called Junction Village. And the discussions we've been having about Junction Village, and Lee and Peter on your committee can speak on CHDC's behalf, is that I'm just saying my opinion. I think it's time for Junction Village to attach its wagon to MCI Concord's star. MCI Concord has I think the full attention of the state government and the legislature, and if there's and the ability to develop that adjacent site is going to be critical to whatever the town and DCAM agree on to happen at MCI Concord next door. The problem is, and it's an immediate one, if we're not going to get the real estate transfer fee to help hold up the town's end of the housing bargain, we're going to need an earmark in the housing bond bill, the Affordable Homes Act, which is at the Senate right now. There were plenty of earmarks in the House version. There's 6 point that Rep. Cataldo put in, and Rep. Gentile for project 6.5 for project in housing project in Chelmsford. $1 million for a housing project for affordable housing Concord Housing Authority property to expand to a sewer hookup. We don't know if they can get the sewer hookup. That's a separate issue.
Sorry, Keith, you just explain, an earmark is of the 6 billion.
An earmark is a specific amount for a particular purpose, but the way that a bond authorization works is that just because you get an earmark doesn't mean you get the cash unless there's subsequent appropriation. But if you don't have the earmark, then you don't have the right to stand in line later to get money out of it. What we're talking about now is $6 billion housing bond bill, and there isn't gonna be another bill in the next 5 years. So what we're looking at is the idea of requesting Senator Barrett for an earmark for collectively MCI Concord and the adjacent Junction Village property that CHDC owns, and probably language, which is a side issue, but CHDC's 2010 statute requires all the housing it builds on that 12 acres to be affordable.
I'm gonna suggest that we come back to this, I appreciate.
Yeah, so we're gonna be moving on this today. And so we wanted to bring it up here so that you're not caught unawares of why is there 50, why didn't you hear about a $50 million earmark sought in the state budget?
When
So
you
just-
say
just-
move on it today, what do you mean by that?
Well, because the Senate is going to be releasing its version of the Affordable Homes Act
Right,
at any.
so you're going
At any
to
time.
Senator Barrett? I just don't know what you mean.
So, and Senator, right, our Senator Mike Barrett has the ability, as part of Senate leadership, to help craft what's in that bill.
Mhm.
As an individual senator, he can put in an earmark as anyone else can. So we're just saying, it's a big ask. And simply didn't want it to come out of the blue and have you folks not know what's going on.
Appreciate that.
That's
Okay. Thanks.
Sure, and finally, what is the staff working on right now? And so, we are working to collect case studies about other properties in the Commonwealth and beyond. And one thing that we're starting to look at, seriously is a West Concord master plan update. This has been a study or a plan that was put together in 2010, I believe, April of 2010. And it's really an excellent document, and looking through it, there has been so many changes. And so thinking about, the 40B, it's an area proposed and recently approved for Novo. Some of the physical connections, we're looking towards an Assabet pedestrian bridge. There's this property, there's been a lot of shifting in that area and trying to capture that so that when we're starting to look at the future of MCI Concord, it's put in a appropriate context for not only what is there today, but what is the collective vision for this important part of the community. So more to come on that.
Yeah, do you have funding in line for that? Or where would be the source of funding?
I don't have that lined up yet. I'm thinking about. I'd say we're just kind of in the early stages of how of thinking through it with staff. But I mean, I think when we're looking at this potential funding that could be coming through from the legislature, if it's $475,000 for Concord planning. How are we thinking that could be spent, and is that an opportunity for using a portion of that to update the area's plan, but more to come on that. So that's what I have for today. Happy to be here and answer questions that I can, and thanks for having me.
Anyone have any other questions, Mary?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mary Hartman. I'd just like to add, Megan,
Sure.
to one of the things we learned in our last conversation with DCAM on Friday was that they're doing a survey, but it's unclear whether the parking lot across Con Ave from the person is included in this parcel. And the issue is that MassDOT has their eyes on that for a possible Route 2 redesign. So Matt, the point I'm making is that it's still up in the air, but I think MassDOT is a group that you want to get connected with pretty quickly. And I think Kyle, you're working on that as well. So you're putting together future meeting agendas, include that pretty soon.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else? Right, excellent, thank you. You know, just doing that quick update, it occurs to me that, I think the challenges are really apparent for this school, and I'm gonna try to simplify it in my, because that's why I have to do it in my mind, but it seems to me that the two overarching paths that we have are exploration and inclusion. And I'm sure there's something else we could add to that, but that's kind of what I'm focused on. So for the purpose of saying, I'm staying on the agenda, but it occurs to me when we get into this next section, how we're going to organize an approach. We have a group of really talented and connected and smart people here. And at some level, I would really love to just almost do a brain dump and get everyone's concerns on the table. Whether I stay in this position or not, I just think it would be really helpful for the group so that so that nothing kind of, the marbles roll off the table. But I'll try to stay focused, stay focused on our agenda today. The next section talks about organization and approach. And we talk about how we're going to tackle this. The list is, you guys probably already read this. I'd love to talk about this, just maybe for a couple of minutes, and see how people are thinking about this, or if they've had a chance to think about it. You know, my background, I think I mentioned to you last time, is planning, and this could just be a function of how my brain works, and I'll put that on the table, but I don't like to start anything until I know what I'm gonna do and what I'm trying to do, because you can be assured, at least in my experience, that if you don't have a plan, you're likely to get there wherever you're going. And so I kind of feel like, and that may not be where you want to end up, I guess is my point. So I tend to start with goals, which I think I mentioned at the last meeting. I don't know that we're ready to do that today, but I do throw that out there for people's consideration. The process, and I don't know if people want to react or.
That would be great, makes sense.
Okay. You know, even in that time between the first meeting and the second meeting, I was thinking about a lot of stuff. I know you're not supposed to make a habit, occasional conversation with people just because it's an interesting topic. And so there's so many aspects of this project, and it's moving very rapidly as we're hearing this morning. So, any comments on the description of the phases, or any corrections or amendments that people would see to that in terms of the phases? So this is the only one that I might propose swapping around would be a goal setting.
I'm sorry, I don't have that sheet in
Sure.
front of me. I don't know if you could. Thank you.
I guess I'm trying to balance, in my head, I do a little differently. Information gathering would come first and then kind of the goal. Sounds like we have a lot of the information being collected or out there, but before we know what we're even able to do. So maybe those things kind of go in parallel, you know.
I think they do, and I think it's a good point. And you know, the other part of this thing is that none of these processes are particularly linear. And so, as we're seeing, things are going to come in, things that we have very little control over, timelines are going to potentially send us in a wrinkle. So, you know, our ability to sort of navigate those and be fleet on our feet, I think will be useful to us. And that hopefully informs the structure. Maybe there's a rapid response group. You know, I'm just pie in the sky right now, but maybe there's some portion of us that can be a receptor for that kind of information and figure out how to transmit it to the appropriate parties. You know, if we do decide to organize ourselves around groups, and not speak about that a little bit.
Again, just adding on to this point about information gathering. it would be helpful to understand, I think it's time sensitive, exactly what kind of rights does the town have in the property, right?
Mhm.
Because as Keith said, things are moving very fast. I think we were all a little caught by surprise when this kind of suddenly popped up earlier this spring. So it would be really helpful, maybe this is, when we get that kind of agenda where the folks from DCAM could explain, but I'd love to understand with some clarity. What rights does the town have here? In other words, do we have to do something first to kind of secure control to the option to redevelop the site, acquire the site, et cetera? Or is that something that's kind of already been decided, so we can take our time and be more systematic going through this process?
I think that's a great point. It's a great question.
Before the legislation is enacted, the answer is 0. This is my view.
Okay. But once the legislation is enacted, then what?
I mean, the versions that I've seen talk about planning exercise and public outreach and certain, maybe this committee and other Concord stakeholders having a seat at the table, but other than that proposed for right of first refusal, et cetera, it's pretty vague.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe to this point, so if we're thinking about project phases, it feels like that's kind of our project. And that, our ability to control that, whereas I think it'd be very important to be also looking at kind of the externalities, right? Whether it's a legislative process or these other, kind of major. If you think about it in terms of like a decision tree or logic flow, it's gonna go one way or the other. And where is that happening? So that we can kind of then, I think it'll be very important to then be able to your point on planning. Making sure that we're accounting for those events, whether it's preparing for them and our ability to influence them, or then needing to capture the follow-up. Coming out of one of those events, did it go left or did it go right? And then how does that inform our own project plan?
So does it make any sense based on what everyone's talking about to just sort of spend some time soon to try to identify and then just break it down by what internally we have control over what's supported.
Absolutely, some sort of memo. But it's not
Yeah,
that-
I think the longer term goals are something that will come. I think first priority is to clarify our rights, right? And once we understand that, then we're in a position, I think, to think longer term about stakeholder communication, goals, all that other stuff.
Absolutely. And not to take you off your agenda, but I mean, it sounds like there's some vague understanding, but maybe not a total understanding of what's going on in legislation. And I agree with you. The words in the legislation basically said DCAM consults with us, does a study, and then can do whatever it wants. So maybe it's important that this group understand. I don't know if everyone understands exactly what's in the legislation has read it, but and it hasn't passed.
So just to that point, I think the group as a whole maybe should think about, do we want to operate as of this moment with the current version of the legislation as if it were going to be enacted, because that's really all we've got. And then to the extent it's amended, pivot, and then if we have to pivot further once it's actually enacted, we can do that. But if we just wait till it's enacted, we've kind of lost a lot of time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have that much experience, interacting with the legislative part of it, but I'm one to always sort of be willing to press back a little bit to your point, and so, it would be nice to know what we can do, at least as construct, and then what we might want to really press back on.
And maybe that's a question for Kyle, the likelihood that anything's gonna get changed besides that at 475,000.
Yeah, now that the budget language not relating to the money, relating to the process, that has passed both the House and Senate, so we don't expect any changes to come out of that language. I think the only thing up in the air now is how much money would be associated with it.
There you go.
Okay.
So then can somebody just clarify, if the language passes as currently drafted, what would that mean in terms of the town's rights in the property?
You mean, was that a rhetorical question?
No,
no,
looking for a
I
question. Again, it's
So I think what we said, there's no real right, there's just a process laid out by
So that-
which they consult with us. And they have a certain amount of time to do reports, and then they can dispose of it either by selling to us for $1. And then coming up with the sales, splitting proceeds partnership, or dispose of it however they want. So there's really no bite to it from what I can see
I think this is right of first refusal for the town.
for the wastewater. Is it
Just
for
the
the, I
wastewater.
thought it was just for the wastewater, Kyle, am I right about that?
Yeah, that's just for the wastewater treatment plant. And then, so the purpose of the legislation or for this budget amendment language was to kind of mandate a friendly relationship between the state and town through this process. So the process should get us all to a point where we agree on what is the best way to transfer this property, whether it be to the town, be to a developer from DCAM. So this is supposed to outline that process over the next 18 months.
That's helpful.
And
Definitely.
this is pretty elementary, and sorry, I wasn't at the meeting in person last time, so I didn't have the benefit of looking at this map, but so the state owns the whole parcel. Does Concord own any of it? None of it, okay, I had thought Concord owned a piece of it, all right.
However, 12.7 acres directly adjacent, abutting, is owned by CHTC,
Yes,
which we're proposing. to-
this is the Junction Square,
Junction
is that what the
Village.
Junction Village right here?
Yeah,
Okay,
which we're proposing to be considered in the larger
Alright.
master planning.
got it, okay,
But that's limited to open space and housing by deed restriction,
okay,
affordable housing.
Any other thoughts on the project phase portion of that item? And there's a lot to still be dealt with, but. And I think, as we've sort of all mentioned, I think things are gonna become clearer as the time goes by and falls, but. The next one is kind of self-evident, that there's so much information coming at us, and, the question is, how do we manage it? For me, you know, how do we, what sort of protocols can we set up? What are there, in my mind, there's information coming from folks up on the screen, and then as well as in this room. And you know, is there value, is it even practical to try to create a portal where all this stuff could go to and then be disseminated?
Amongst this group, yeah.
Yeah,
Just keep in mind, this will be public records.
right.
The other town committees use a structure that we can.
I've never been, well, I think it was some of the experience on the planning board, for example, and CMLP, it's pretty well managed by staff. And it seems to me that, I guess I'm looking to Megan now, it seems to me that the DCAM folks and even, Rep Cataldo, they're gonna flow through you, that kind of information. Is that safe to assume, or is that not safe?
Yeah, I think so. And we're just sidebarring here. We're happy to set up the technical side of, folder for review, for this group where we can add in information, and there's definitely a lot to collect. So I think rather than sending attachments around, it would make sense to have a home base, so we can work on that.
I still continue to think that there would be a value to a very elementary outline of the players, the site, the legal structure that's going on here, because if we just start getting bombarded with information, it's not gonna really. I think it's gonna be hard to piece together. I think we should just act like we don't know anything. I don't know if everyone agrees with that, and then just lay it all out.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, even just, you know, trying to keep track of who's in the room right now and what their roles are, I think that would be really helpful.
So you're saying like an FAQ that people can come to and just get a quick
The
overview.
property, you know, like what you were saying, this is what we control,
Yeah.
this who controls what, and then the players and DCAM and DOC and.
It's just a fact base.
Just fact-based, because we're gonna have to kind of build on that structure to understand what DOC is doing, what DOT is doing,
Even a
so,
bit of the narrative, right, is like, where did this start, and where are we now?
yes.
Right, and then like major open questions.
I think that could be really helpful, especially when it comes time to start, opening it up a little bit to stakeholders and, so that, because I can imagine somebody coming into it, asking a lot of very fundamental questions and not realizing that it's actually structure and organization to it, so.
along those lines, it would be helpful to walk the site.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we're all looking at a picture, but I think it's a much different if you see it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And that would, I imagine we would organize that through DCAM? Or,
So it's still under, Department of
MCI.
Correction right now, and, there has been a lot of interest in doing that.
Yeah.
So as soon as it's available as, no longer a secure site, we'll definitely.
so is that
But
July
Kyle's
first?
you could walk the CHTC site and see it from the back.
Right, yeah.
If you want.
So Megan, would that be after July first theoretically?
Yeah, I mean, at the early, it wouldn't be before then, and we'll definitely let you know when we can start coordinating that. Kyle, do you have any updates on that? I know you've gotten a lot of questions in that round.
Yeah, we're actually meeting with the EOC on Wednesday of this week to discuss,
Okay.
start the preliminary discussions on site visits and tours for interested parties.
Yeah, I might just make the comment that we do already have an MCI closure webpage set up, which has quite a bit of information already, including some site maps. And so that I believe that Shannon is primarily editing that, and so some direct feedback on that. I heard the idea of a narrative and the players I think would make sense. You're all listed there. The usual committee information is also available there about agendas and so forth, but there is some additional information that I think people would find helpful, as well as a link to some maps that sort of suggest the environmental status and some of the historic and other resources. The maps that I think you have in paper in front of you are also available. So I think that we could build on that and use that as a way of communicating. Certainly, community education is a big part, and I think that this group should be angling towards a date, in my mind, something in early September when people are back and paying attention, to update the community more broadly on what the progress has been so far, what investigations are underway, and how we've organized in response to these legislative initiatives. That feels like a good set of timing for me to begin to do that.
That makes sense. Okay. Any other comments or questions on communication?
Question on that.
Yep.
I'm not sure, Dan, it's appropriate to ask. Megan, is that something town staff could help put together? That's kind of that overview memo?
Oh, I see, exactly, the narrative.
Sure. I'd say, I think it'd be helpful for folks to look at the webpage and see if you have some information there. But yes, we can do that.
And I think one of the things we can do is we can just commit to putting those links on every agenda going forward so that people can easily find it when they click through and see the meetings posted. I think that'll be useful.
Yeah, so that's.
And in terms of understanding kind of like the state or legislative process, is that information that Representative Cataldo's office could make available or present?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you can get us on agenda for maybe next meeting, I think the rep would definitely be happy to attend and go through the process with you all.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I think we've had similar offers from Senator Barrett's office to lend his perspective as well, and I think we can take advantage of that.
Okay. The next point is stakeholders, and I've started to, again, it's not my brain works, but I just started to create a list and some big groups, and I think it would be really helpful to benefit from everyone's mind on that, and then maybe we could just put it up on a wall and see if we see where the overlaps are. Maybe we can do that for us upcoming meeting. Mark just gave us a timeline of September, so that will come quick. So maybe we can do that for our next meeting and the meeting after that. That makes sense to people.
There is this parallel committee. It's part of the legislation. That I'm assuming hasn't been formed yet, but there's a bunch of designees that are listed in the legislation for the commissioner, which I assume is DCAM. to meet with. So I don't know how their process would dovetail into what we're doing and when those things might coincide, but. Seems like they've already got a set of stakeholders listed there.
Okay. I'd suggest that this group meet at least as frequently as that group.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, members, it's a
Day
members,
before and the day after.
yeah, so members of any advisory body established by the select board of the town can be part of this other committee, so we could have representative, I think, on the committee.
Does it have a name yet?
Should definitely.
Yeah, just to clarify that in the legislation, it's not a committee, it's just referencing the stakeholders that DCAM has to consult with through the process. So this is a bare minimum. This is obviously just an exclusive list. These are the people who we're basically requiring DCAM to reach out to and produce a report from on what they would like to see happen with the property or consult with.
So Kyle, is there a chairperson or some main point of contact with that group, or is that you guys? I'm sorry.
This will be through DCAM, so I assume Paul will be the one doing a lot of this outreach as well as the commissioner of DCAM.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that up.
Hey, Dan,
Yes,
in Medfield's visioning report for their state hospital reposition, these are the stakeholders that were involved in their committees. If you wanna,
It actually looks like this entire thing is pretty much a layout of everything we're talking about.
Yeah,
Things
exactly.
I've seen, so.
Yeah.
It's the Medfield State, yeah, hospital. What Medfield did to structure their
it's the
whole
whole structure,
study.
it's about how they structured their committees, how they went through the whole process.
There's a whole, there's a flow chart in there, like you were talking about.
Redevelopment is right now.
Yeah, Medfield purchased the property from DCAMP for, I think, 2 or 3 million. And they're developing it themselves.
Like mixed use or.
It's a lot of historic renovations and then some housing and then green space and then some public use, I believe.
all right, that's great. Thank you, Scott, for sharing that.
Can you share the link? to
I can
that
share
with the committee?
I can share the link. They can send me. Right.
And if we share things between each other, like, who does
Yeah.
that have to go through? How is
Who do
that
I
Go
gonna
through
be
you,
effective?
yeah, it goes to Shannon.
Shannon, okay. So if you just send it to Shannon.
Yeah, and what I would suggest is, as we identify documents like that one, we can link them hopefully at the webpage so that the public can read them as well.
Okay.
I guess also, how do we make sure we get someone on that, a representative on that committee? That you,
It doesn't sound like it's actually a committee,
or it's just,
it's just a list of people that the stakeholders need, or the commissioner needs to meet with.
So do we do that through Paul? Or someone in?
I'm assuming until that legislation is passed, this doesn't happen,
Yeah.
but.
right,
Yeah.
You just
But
want
just
to
so we're
read
on there.
the stakeholders.
Sure,
mentioned, just
the commissioner shall consult stakeholders and other interested persons, including but not limited to the Secretary of Housing and Livable Communities or their designee, the Secretary of Transportation, the Secretary of Public Safety and Security, it's page 341. For their designee, members of the Select Board of the Town of Concord, members of any advisory board established by the Select Board of the Town of Concord regarding the reuse of the MCI Concord, Chair of the Board of Concord Housing Development Corporation. The Concord representative to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, Just- District Council Chair for the Urban Land Institute, Boston, New England. Executive Director of the Concord Business Partnership, Executive Director of ORS, or their designee.
It's kind of like 4 town reps. These.
Yes.
Select board, CHCC, MAPC.
Business Partnership.
So should it just stand up that as a subcommittee or something?
Is it ORS Concord or ORS?
I think it's.
Or is it
General,
conflict?
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
seems like those groups should be working together.
Yeah.
and At least receive information before we give it.
Yeah, housing development, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and of course, and business partnership, so 5 maybe.
So beyond those groups that are identified already, are there any other stakeholders that we would consider important to bring into our planning process?
Yes.
Many, I would think, I would think the League of Women Voters would like to be involved in this.
That would be wonderful.
And then this isn't really stakeholder related, but there's also a whole process in terms of once the legislation is passed. Town hearings have to occur in a certain number of days after a study is done. So I'm assuming, given the legislation has to be passed and the study has to be done, that's a ways out, but it's something like within no less than 60 days prior to finalizing the study. The first public hearing shall take place no later than 45 days after the effective date of the act. So there's a
That's
whole
important.
calendar here that.
45 days on that.
Right.
Yeah.
No.
So in the discussion that we had last week with DCAMS, with Paul and Abby, myself and Megan, there was some discussion about that first and early meeting and whether or not, how we might coordinate that and how much information we might want to make sure is out and available to the community ahead of that, whether we want to, thinking in terms of there's a need to really understand what's on site, and then there's a need to collect information about goals and needs and wants for the site. And so because DCAM has this specific 45 days that they need to get going, that is likely to coincide with this sort of early September timeframe that we were talking about. And so, planning for that level of community engagement and doing that in conjunction with DCAM, I think is an important sort of early goal for the next, let's call it 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. Any other points on that? Any other questions, comments? Okay, team structure. I think we're already, as you said, it's non-linear, so we're kind of talking about these pieces already. Are there any thoughts in terms of, highly important groups that we'd want to try to form soon, early on?
Dan, I'll share this Medfield document with everybody to Shannon, but one thing they did early on, they had sort of 2 phases of committees, depending on the development and then actual execution. And they broke up this group into like 4 groups, and they had like a liaison with DCAM, and they had like the communications committee, and they had people who were sort of this construction designers who were involved with the master planning and the construction feasibility and the remediation costs. And then you could also include like something to do with the housing bond bill or something like that. You could break it up that way, that's some ideas we break up into little committees, but like with specialization in certain things like that. But I really like the idea of the liaison with DCAM, having a couple people really.
Well, while you're on that, and thank you, Scott, for bringing that, I think it's helpful. Are there other high priority topics that just pop into people's minds right now that we would want to make sure that add to the list that you just rattled off? Is there any?
I struggle a little bit to come up with work streams in the abstract, admittedly, like to your point, Dan, earlier on like, what are the objectives? And then what are the questions we need to answer to be able to achieve the objective? And then being able to then organize, like whether we call them committees or like I would think of them as like work streams.
Yeah.
To then be able to kind of scope, okay, how are we going to answer these questions? Like, when do we go out whether it's going out to the community or engaging other stakeholders or just collecting information or running a survey, whatever it is. Like, I'm sure we could kind of fumble around and, sorry, I mean, but like find the right organization and structure eventually, but if we were able to kind of work backwards from where we're trying to like hit the target, whether that means going off and doing a little bit of homework and then coming back to the next committee, maybe that's.
Yeah, I agree, but I also think that it's crucial to get some people established following what's going on at the state level. Right away, so that's all on the state level, not just
Yeah.
DCAM, but
Yeah.
the budget and all that.
I wonder if just in terms of making sure we're all at the same starting point here, it would be helpful, maybe we could hear from. You know, maybe at the next meeting, Kyle, if the representative could come and kind of give us 15 minutes on his view of how we got here. Maybe Senator Barrett could do the same, maybe the folks from DCAM could share kind of their current status, so we can, again, just make sure we're all up to speed on this, you know, on what's transpired so far, and we also understand what these experts who are direct participants in the process are expecting and would like to see from us.
Absolutely. And do you have a time for the next meeting yet?
No, it's one.
It's on the agenda.
We're getting close.
All right, I'll wait till we get there.
No, but it's absolutely the right question.
Paul,
Yeah, likewise, as I think Megan mentioned at the top, we would love to get out there and get in touch with you. We're kind of I'm just here to listen today, but we want to get out there in the next meeting or two and would love to come in person and actually meet you all in person, and hopefully we can find time for several of us to come out. So it's a good kickoff to our collaboration together.
Yeah.
Just so there's no mystery about it, I based on the doodle poll that I already sent out, and I think virtually everybody responded to, it looks to me as though June 24th, which is a Monday at 6 p.m. we had 10 folks responding that they could make that date. There also seemed to be a pretty good availability on the following day, the 25th, I believe it was at 12:30. So that would put us 2 weeks out, which to me at least felt like it was an opportunity for us to process some of what's come out of this meeting and give folks an opportunity to set an agenda and be prepared to respond to it. I think one of the central questions here is also what's the cadence? Does every 2 weeks sort of feel about right for this work, or obviously it's all subject to change as we get busier and events take place. But I think it's useful for us to have at least visibility to the next, and at least the next 2 sessions usually will probably be helpful.
Yeah, and I could easily imagine if it's possible, the subcommittees meeting at in the interim, in between that time, just to get some work done.
Yeah, Mark, I even aspire to more than 2 meetings out. If we could get ourselves in a regular cadence where we say we meet the first Monday or the third Monday, or whatever that is, then we can all have better visibility.
Right.
And maybe DCAM and the representatives can help us with this, but there seems like there's a list of deliverables that I don't totally understand. Like there's a survey, there might be some studies, like what would this initial allotment go towards funding, or what would those things be that we would be preparing for receiving, I guess.
Yeah, was that a question that you want someone to answer?
No, I mean, I was just putting it on the agenda for future.
I think the difficulty, which is often the case in any challenging planning effort, is we've got something that's already moving and we're trying to come up to speed. And I think this, maybe it's not the right term, but for lack of a better one right now, some sort of rapid response in the interim, it can be the receiver for this and can discern between this warrants us focusing on it versus, no, we've got a little time to process this. I think will probably be helpful. And maybe we can, before we leave today, we can identify 2 or 3 people that might be, that have different sensibilities that could serve in that purpose. Just a thought, but maybe someone else has another idea for how to deal with it.
So basically getting the information from, say, Kyle's office or figure out if something's gonna be voted on the
Yeah,
next
I
day
think
or.
Megan's gonna be, it seems to Megan and Sharon gonna be an important piece of this and
Yeah.
just sort of receiving and saying, all right.
I'm happy to be on that.
Great.
As part of that budget, if 475, we get that, these processes take a long time. Gonna take years. So
Mhm.
who's responsible for the security of the site, the patrols, the safety of the site?
Mhm.
Is that who's paying for all that? Is that coming out of this money, or is this something?
You're talking about the informational site that we'll maintain?
With you boarding up the buildings, taking security, the physical,
It's owned by DCAM until it's not.
what?
It's gonna be owned by DCAM until it's not. It should be their responsibility.
Okay. Which one? Make sure.
That's a good question.
That, if you don't mind, the DCAM has, and the Department of Corrections, through conversations with both of them, then, stated that there'll be a presence on campus for the duration to make sure it is intact and secured and continues to be maintained, the systems, that's the communication and share. It's not gonna be like, July 1, or even someday after that they.
Right.
And I think there's been different models with other properties, across the Commonwealth, but the conversation has been a commitment to securing the presence on the campus.
Okay.
No, something
Is
is
that included in inventory and everything?
In inventory?
An inventory?
Yes.
But what's in the building?
Of what's it,
Everything.
what all the assets are and to what detail.
For sure.
Yeah.
I maybe
I'm happy to.
very fundamental question, but if it is DCAM. And it's not property that Concord owns, but if there's an event, some sort of, I don't know, once they are out of there, public tour. Yeah, is Concord police responding or is state, do you know the answer? We don't know. Okay, I'm sort of curious how that would work.
One thing, this is just an overarching issue, and I know that I've been concerned about it, and some other people have questioned about it, is there's definitely the feeling that we have already decided as a town, or some people decided that we do not want to own this property. And maybe I'm overstating that, but that's the sense that I get from speaking to some people. And my personal opinion is that we're way too soon into this to determine whether that's true. So I assume we're operating under the assumption that we may want to.
Yeah.
So, we may not want to, but to say no right now, maybe.
If I could just add on to that.
Yes.
It's a big site.
Yeah.
And, contamination, just as one example, could be
Yep.
very different on this part than on that part.
Right, but that's part of the whole deal.
So we can just on that.
That's-
We're
But
buying
I
part
just
of the
mean
same.
like, to just have to make like a collective judgment about that down the road might be, it may be.
More nuanced than just we're gonna buy the site or not buy the site.
All of the site.
Yeah,
You know what I
yes,
mean?
yes, absolutely. That's fine. In my mind, we're just not even there yet.
I just think it has to be still open after, we have a lot of work to be done on this, on the remediation costs and the demolition costs and all that. You gotta get everything in front of you, but you've got to, I think your question, Elizabeth, is that still open? Is it on the table at some future date that Concord may have interest if it's available from DCAM to purchase the site? I just want to, because that's kind of like the elephant in the room here.
And it's important messaging to DCAM too,
It's important
because if
messaging.
we're saying to DCAM, we're not interested even, then that's,
Right.
I think, at least from my point of view, that DCAM should think that that's a possibility that we may want to go with that,
I think we're all here because we want to engage with DCAM
right?
to potentially, acquire, I'm imagining best case outcomes, we do acquire the site and we
Yeah.
do have the opportunity to redevelop it. So I'm
Mhm.
hoping that is the outcome of this whole process.
Yeah.
Mhm.
One way to look at it is the ultimate uses, whether we recommend that or whoever ultimately decides, but for example, open space. Does that go to Concord or does it go to like an ORS or a private
Mhm.
entity? Housing, does that go straight to a developer or does it CHGC or
Yeah.
business? Does that go to?
Yeah, that's part of the problem.
So,
I
yeah,
think even more complexity is when you say the ultimate use, could there be interim uses of the buildings? That, maybe you have a maker space or maybe an entrepreneurial, kind of incubator for a while in some of the buildings if they're
Yeah.
still intact and usable.
that's a good point.
Ultimately, maybe that becomes housing or multi, a multiple use kind of building, but
Interim and.
yeah, yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
So just to, I don't wanna lose track of your offer, which I think.
I
I'm go-
already forgot what I offered.
I'll leave my.
You want to bring us free food for the rest
All
of the
right,
meeting?
free food. Are we allowed to eat in the library? I don't know.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can.
This is the rapid response receiving, and I'm going to, put Lee on the spot for a second, because I would imagine it would be good to have some of your experience in that too, if you would be willing to do that. Just, again, perhaps it's an interim thing, but to have the two of you guys, because this could be a lot, and I think you have slightly different. Okay, great, thank you. We were talking about team structure. We're gonna think about possible, and Scott made the point that we have this great document, this great Medfield model to sort of explore. But between now and when we meet theoretically in a couple of weeks, we could begin to identify what we think are important groups. Timeline, to your point, I think we could also do the same thing. It seems to me, in order to do that, we're gonna need a lot more information from the state. And to understand those externalities that are gonna sort of guide our work or drive our work. So I personally don't feel ready to map that out, but if others have some thoughts on that they wanna communicate at this point, I'm happy to hear them. I'm also happy to think about it for a couple of weeks.
I agree. I think we need more information.
Okay, and I don't, the other question is, when we're doing work on this stuff, are we gonna save it for when we all get together, or are we gonna just start dumping it in this portal or collection place that we have? And we don't have to figure that out now, but we should pretty quickly. So we don't lose track of it. Yes.
So as we look forward to upcoming meetings, will there be, in addition to agendas, various documents that will be posted so that we sort of can spend some time going over common materials that would be beneficial to prepare for the next meeting?
I hope so. I think you and I are probably coming from slightly similar experiences, and certainly CMLP was the same thing. There was a lot of information for me to. And maybe if I understand a couple of comments you made, I'd do best when I have time to process it, read it, and then come in. If I'm sitting here trying to do that all at once, I don't always do my best work. So I'm hoping that will mean that as we're doing this, or as the subcommittees are doing that, maybe there's a day that say, put a pencil down and I'm going to go with what we have at that moment, so that people can have a time to process it. That makes sense. That answered, if I responded to a question that I didn't allow you to get to.
Well, especially if the documents are related to topics of conversation. Yeah, so that'd be good.
Okay. Any other things on that? I'm not doing it. I think I'm gonna be fired after the first thing. So I'm not doing a great job keeping us on time, but so if there aren't any other comments on that section, let's jump into information exchange, which you kind of touched on. But not completely behind the ball. Trying to think if there's anything on there that we haven't touched already. Touched on.
I guess just the legal question of how many of us can talk to each other offline. How many of us are there?
There are two technically, so,
Okay.
but that's, I mean, that counts as kind of open.
So you can't talk to anyone.
Two people can talk, right?
Well, just be saying no.
Oh.
That would count as a subcommittee.
And
I think that we should, this is probably the open meeting law.
Yeah.
But on the long range plan committee, two of us got together to do some survey development to present at the next meeting. And we ended up getting sued by a citizen who said that we were meeting outside of open meeting format, and we actually got censured by somebody. So I think even two people talking outside is not.
Otherwise, it was just two of you guys.
So one person talking is a very quick.
You can talk.
Or we can go through Shannon and Shannon can just first information.
Dan, I'm speaking of communication, I know that the community at large is very interested in this project, and I know that's important. We should be getting information out, but I'm just curious, what is what's the conduit for the Concord Bridge and other things, to make sure that that message is on par with what our committee is doing as a whole.
I haven't even seen this group mentioned in my paper.
Once.
Yeah.
They mentioned
Not that-
Last week,
Last week
I
is-
received a call from a reporter with the bridge, and I just forwarded it to
So
me.
I think that's important that we're going through one person and what that message is and.
Yep.
Because we don't want to give up.
Should there should be some sort of online submission form or something on it, if people have comments, there's some way they can submit that.
We're not the first committee that's gonna have a lot of citizen interest.
Yeah.
Right? So I think whatever the town typically does, right?
Yeah.
By default, probably, if anyone speaks, it should probably be the chair.
Uh-huh.
And then whatever the town does in terms of handling inquiries, I think should be routed to us or. I mean,
Yeah,
We'll probably have, correspondence in our future meetings, right? We may hear from. people.
It just might be nice for when you're talking about community outreach, just to have some, so people feel here's an input form or something where they can already,
Yeah, yeah.
which I don't know if you guys do that already.
So I now would ask, I'm thinking of something similar to like the town meeting study committee had set up. They set up an email address for their committee to go to the chair and myself. So if people have direct comments that they wanted to submit, things get a little tricky with IT. I won't get too much into the details, but it works as like a distribution email. It's not like one that you can log into, but that's a good way to have an input directly sent to the committee. And they also were asking about how to best communicate with the Concord Bridge, and I think the town moderator was gonna connect them with the reporter who had worked pretty specific on the town meeting stuff, but I haven't seen like a certain form for them, but I know Celeste Katz, she's the one who typically attends select board meetings. I think she does most of the town specific reporting. I have her contact information. I'm sure the select board members have been in contact with her before too.
I like the email idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Great idea. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
On the topic of random information that really is immaterial, but I'll share. Emily and I are brother and sister. I don't know if people know that.
I didn't
but just
know
in the
that.
interest of full transparency, I want you guys to know that.
You can't talk about this at Thanksgiving again.
Promise this
Seems like the entire.
Let's try to hide it, but.
It's part of a family takeover plan for the.
Right. Any other thoughts or ideas people want to share? Or
Anybody else related or married to each other? I couldn't get it out.
Okay, good. Next steps, Mark kind of jumped out in front of that. Is that pretty much work for everybody?
24th at 6.
Well, those two dates, can we find out which one works better for DCAM and the representatives?
Are we thinking we invite them? We thinking if we can?
I think the sooner the better.
Okay, yeah, get
Yeah.
that out there.
I have to say that I heard DCAM and legislative update as being the priorities, I think, for the next session, if that, and was there anything else that, and maybe Paul's got some input on whether or not they can make that.
We are still trying to coordinate schedules on the DCAM side. We may need to look to 2 sessions out. We will circle back with Mark on that specifically.
Okay.
On the legislative side, I know Rep. Cataldo would make the 24th, but not the 25th.
Okay, thank you.
So,
So, and just looking forward, I think to John's point, how does a bi-weekly every other week, generally on Monday, sound to folks? That would put us on July 8 and July 22, which both happen to be select board days. So for Mary and myself, we would need to do something in the daytime. I know you guys have stepped up and come in during the day today. I don't know how much pain that causes versus evening meetings.
Do people have a preference for Mondays over Tuesdays?
I would prefer
Or Monday.
Anytime or night.
I prefer
Anytime
daytime.
or nighttime.
Also. Just in general, daytime, I don't know if that works for people, but.
If it could be more in the noon hour, that would be better for me.
Okay. So did I hear noon on Mondays?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
That'll be
Okay.
good.
All right, let's try that and see if that works going forward, and we'll put at least 4 on the calendar, which would take us through the first week of August.
Awesome.
And given summer schedules can be a little unpredictable, what do we need for a quorum? Do we need a majority or?
I think just majority, yeah.
Okay.
Including
So, yes.
including virtual attendees, or is that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yes, including virtual, and we'll do these hybrid. I think that given the busy lives and the number of people, it makes sense to continue to do that. Also, I appreciate the ability to have that live recording, which will also be made available. All right.
For the next meeting, would it make sense to add, like what I call governance to the agenda, where we kind of get through some of this housekeeping stuff and try and nail it down, whether it's like meeting cadence and calendar, file sharing, emerging roles, how we're expected to communicate. And then like guardrails, right, for like what we're allowed to do and not do. Great.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah.
Personally, yeah, and then, hopefully, next meeting or close to that, we'll do the goals. We have to put that.
Did we also want to talk with DOT? Wanted to.
That would be good.
Yeah, we'd like to. Is District 4? The code is- I think it's District 4. Okay, so just as a reminder, we talked about sort of homework between now and next meeting, identifying concerns. That's just a brain dump. And so we can bring whatever form we can do that, including just a brain. But it'd be great to, try to commit that to paper, and the stakeholders beginning to think about that. I think that list is probably going to evolve over time. Scott had a great suggestion to sort of check out the example that we have. And then beginning to think about committee definition. We have our rapid responsive, Lee and Elizabeth already rolling. Good. Any other things or concerns, comments?
Does
Steve,
this
could you-
housing thing fall into the rapid response,
I think
item?
so
Yeah.
For now, until we.
Those zoning,
I'm sorry.
the zoning is industrial now, right? So
Yeah.
what is the process for evaluating that? Is that way down? Or is that after we come up with,
I would think zoning would be later.
how long does that take?
Early, but
What is the process for rezoning? How many?
Town meeting.
yeah,
So are we talking like it's a year planning kind of?
yeah,
thing?
unless you do a special town meeting, but I don't see is.
But ordinarily, the town warrant is set by the end of the calendar year. We'd have to have our, whatever we're looking to propose, have to go through the planning board, I would imagine,
Okay,
in the fall. Make it onto the town, onto the warrant as an article, and then be voted on the following May.
So just what does the group think about that as a goal? Proposed zoning amendment for spring town meeting?
You really need to know what you
Yeah,
want in
yeah.
the zoning
You gotta
before
wait.
you can
you gotta wait.
start telling people what
Yeah,
it's.
just a quick-
No,
I think that sounds aggressive.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, the sooner we can get there, great, but I think.
It's aggressive.
that's gonna be
What's aggressive, doing it or the timelines?
The time.
aggressive?
I think it'll have to happen. We'll have to
Why
do it.
not a special town meeting?
I was
Yeah,
just
I-
suggest,
Yeah.
given
The importance.
all of this.
Yeah, I think we
How
should.
is it special?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to our rapid response, so people should know to send things to us. I don't know who. Everyone out there, anything major is happening, Kyle, and I don't know if that goes to Shannon and then you can send it to us.
I can send it to you and we.
Okay, just so they know to send things to you, so we're collecting information now.
Right, anything else? No? No?
We got 7 minutes early.
Wow. That happened.
Not only are you gonna
Fired.
get fired, but you might get. Wow.
Well, so in the interest of full disclosure, I will not be here in person next year, but I'm hoping that I can attend remotely. So,
Move to adjourn.
what? Thank you, move to adjourn. Take it.
Okay.
All those in favor stand and keep on going.
I-
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for bearing with me.